Hey there, I'm Irene with Loving Lessons Pediatric Sleep Consulting, and today I wanted to take some time and talk a little bit about crying. Crying is one of the biggest fears I feel like we as parents may have sometimes when it comes to helping our little ones learn the skill of how to go to sleep. Um, but I want to take it a step further, not just talk about sleep-related crying. I want to just talk about crying in general, because what most of us really start to think about crying and cry it out, like we're going to be damaging our children for life, in so many different ways because we view, or like the world is telling us that crying is bad. And I don't believe that crying is bad. I don't also believe that crying is good. I think crying is crying, and crying can be a natural and healing thing that we do. So I don't think we have to put a label of good or bad on it. It just is what it is. And somewhere along the way in our journeys of life, we've been taught that crying is not okay. One of the things I will share with you that you may or may not know about me is that I am actually a very sensitive and emotional person. And I can be deeply emotional because I can feel things deeply from others around me. And one of the things that I believe to know that is true about children is that they are very sensitive too, and they feel things very deeply. But again, somewhere along the way, along our journey of life, we're taught that maybe we're not supposed to feel that way. And I know that was true for me. I know that I was told before, like, to stop crying, or I would get something to cry about, or my parents would give me something to cry about. I know that I was made to believe that crying was not okay, and crying was showing a huge vulnerability, and that maybe perhaps I was weak or something like that. So there's a lot of myths and different beliefs out there about crying. And so one of the things that I have learned specifically about crying is that crying is a very vulnerable place to be in. Because crying could be crying tears of joy, which I often will do because I'm just sensitive and can become overwhelmed. Crying can be something when there's like fear, or being scared to do something or to try something. Sometimes I might cry because I need help and I don't know how to communicate that. And so sometimes I may just cry. And sometimes I might cry because I'm just grieving. And it could be, grieving the loss of a loved one, but it could also be grieving something that maybe didn't go my way, just a loss in life, because sometimes there's just this emotion of sadness that may overwhelm us. So I bring all that up because there's just all these many different reasons why we may cry. And in my practice, I see a lot of families, and I help families work through this piece with crying to get their little ones to sleep. And oftentimes parents will say, but I want to teach my child how to go to sleep, but I don't want them to cry. And so one of the things that I have found is that we work really, really hard to try to stop our children from crying. And then we don't even give ourselves the opportunity to be with them through those big emotions and to learn. One of the greatest things is to just be with someone through those big, uncomfortable, sometimes scary emotions. So I want to share 3 reasons why I believe children will cry. And these are areas that we can all work to improve in our communication with our little ones, no matter how old they are. And so the 3 reasons why I believe children will cry are usually because they're hungry, so there's truly a need of needing to be fed. Sometimes they're just tired, and I know for myself, if I'm just tired, I'm pretty irritable and cranky until I get the sleep I need. And the third reason that they might cry is sometimes they just need that connection. They just need to be filled with some sort of like loving, connected type of ritual, just to be held in that moment. And so sometimes we just need that because that's kind of how we're wired. As human beings, we're wired for connection. Um, and so I want you to think about in a sleep coaching situation, if you think about sleep and the way you know how to sleep, and I'm going to use us as adults as the example. I know for myself, at night, I'll take off my makeup, take off my jewelry, brush my teeth, get my jammies on. Then I head into my bed. I have my pillow. I have our comforter. I have my books on my nightstand that sometimes are part of my ritual. And so those are all things that are part of my bedtime routine, my sleep hygiene, that help me know and prepare my body to go to sleep. And then I lay down and I go to sleep because that's my safe sleep space. My body knows that this is where I go to sleep. And so I want you to think about a baby, or maybe your toddler or preschooler, and perhaps they've been learning to only go to sleep if they're being held or fed to sleep, or they always have that pacifier to sleep. Or maybe they always have you laying by their side to go to sleep. Or they've learned through their bedtime routine that here's all these things I do to prepare myself for sleep, but then I have that one thing that really helps me do all the going to sleep. So then that sometimes can become that sleep crutch, or maybe a sleep prop or sleep association, whatever you want to call it, that actually holds your child back from actually learning that skill of putting themselves to sleep. And so the tricky part that happens is that our children will become dependent on that. And so a lot of times parents will ask me, well, I want to teach my child the skill of how to go to sleep without whatever that prop or crutch is, but I don't want them to cry. And I just want you to know that if I was going to sleep and you took away my pillow and you didn't let me take my makeup off and you didn't help me like take my earrings off and do all my steps, maybe you took away my blanket and you were like, nope, you can't sleep with that anymore. I would probably cry too. I probably would be like, what is going on? And I'd be frustrated, and I might even be angry with you that you took it away. So there's a good chance there's a lot of different emotions that may come about when you are making change for your child. So I want you to think about reframing crying when it comes to helping your little one learn that skill of to go to sleep. Because here's the thing, when you are changing a habit, there is a good chance that there's going to be some frustration. And so that sometimes may cause a little bit of crying. And learning a new skill can be frustrating. I know for myself, when I'm learning a skill, even during the daytime, I get frustrated and I cry. So learning that skill of going to sleep could certainly make your baby, your toddler, preschooler cry. And there's also this piece, and this is more for the parents. This is a skill that we can learn as we're going through a sleep coaching process, is that we can learn to be with our child through all of their emotions when they're learning that skill of how to go to sleep, and learning to just be present, to be able to give comfort. That physical and verbal presence can be so huge for our little ones, because we actually then get to work on creating a loving and respectful relationship. We're changing how we're communicating with one another, and we're just being there through those big emotions, and we're saying, you know what? No matter what you're going through right now, I'm here with you. And that is a huge mindset shift. And those are some things I want you to think about when it comes to crying and sleep with your little one. It doesn't have to be so scary. I know for myself, personally, I would be annoyed and irritated if someone kept distracting me and telling me that it was not okay for me to have some of my big emotions and feelings that I have. And now, as a grown adult, I have words and I can tell you that. But as a child, as a toddler, as a preschooler, they certainly do not have all those words to communicate with you. So oftentimes they will voice their concerns and their complaints, and sometimes their praises with their squeals, but sometimes with their tears as well. So think about crying in your home, and how are you attending to your child's tears. And how do those tears make you feel? Because oftentimes, believe it or not, those tears can evoke some deep emotions within us. And sometimes those are great things for us to work through some healing as we're there with our child. But one of the things that I want to share with you is that crying is a normal, natural thing for our babies, our toddlers, and our preschoolers to go through. For them to feel some of these big emotions on their own can be a little bit scary. So learning how to be there with them could be crucial to building that loving and trusting relationship. So those are just a few things for you to think about today. I talked to a lot of families about crying. Crying used to really freak me out and overwhelm me many years ago too. And the more and more I learn about crying, the more I realize, when our children are learning that skill of how to go to sleep, there is a good chance that there may be some crying. But the good news for you is that oftentimes it's much less than we expect. And the journey of doing some gentle sleep coaching often results in building that relationship while your child is actually learning that skill of how to go to sleep. So I want to leave you with those thoughts today on crying. I'd love to hear what your experience has been with your child. And we'll talk more about this tough topic of crying and sleeping. All right. Thanks for tuning in here at Loving Lessons. And if you have questions about how to help your little one get sleep, I'd love to talk to you. So hop on my calendar and let's get an appointment, or give me a call, and I'd love to talk to you. Sweet dreams.